dystopian fiction has been moved to current affairs.
Hello there. You are listening to Dystopian Fiction Has Been Moved to Current Affairs. This is episode 44, and today we'll be looking at Bugonia. Claire, I'm going to hand over to you for a wonderful synopsis of
Yeah.
this Yorgos Lanthimos film. Do you want to take it
Yeah.
away?
Yeah, so it's definitely my turn on this. Okay, so heads up, I mean, we always have spoilers, but big spoiler coming
Big
up.
spoiler.
So if you haven't seen it and you don't want to know, go watch it and then turn us back on again. Um, okay, so this is a film about two young American men, one of whom has developed a great series of conspiracy theories around the fact that there are alien invaders from Andromeda who are masquerading as humans and are responsible for everything from kind of the corporate domination of modern day America through to the destruction of the bees. And this guy, Teddy, he cares for his autistic cousin, Don, and I suppose encourages him into a plan to kidnap the CEO of a major pharmaceutical company, played by Emma Stone. They do this, they keep her in a cellar. It's all very barbaric, and they try to get her to reveal her true identity and to take them to the Andromedan ship, where they hope to negotiate the withdrawal of the Andromedans from Earth. And it's a pretty horrible account of an abduction and imprisonment of a woman in a basement, right up until the point at which we learn that she is indeed an Andromedan. And the whole conspiracy theory has been proved to be true. I actually think that might have been the easy bit. I think the discussion we're about to have is good. This is
Yes.
I liked this, but
Mm.
I am confused. I think in terms of it's nice to have a nice kind of like clear analysis, and I'm not sure that we have that. So you can start,
Yeah,
Masha.
we're trying to like outline our thoughts before the episode, and we're just like, you know what? Let's just start. Let's just start talking. Yeah, okay. Initial thoughts. It's quite I don't know. I was sort of we put the label on it that the film's quite nihilistic
Mhm.
in some senses, and very absurdist in
Yeah.
others. With especially the I don't know. I think Claire was sort of saying the big reveal at the end that Emma Stone's character is in fact an alien kind of makes you reassess your prejudices
Mm.
of the characters. But I guess let's start off. Let's talk about I guess like Teddy.
Yeah,
Um,
because right from the start, obviously, we're set up with this kind
yeah.
of character that I guess we're relatively familiar with from the sorts of things that we
Mhm.
often discuss. And the conspiracy theory that he presents seems so implausible, I guess. So much a sort of manifestation of his own, I guess, trying to provide a narrative justification to the things that have gone wrong in his life and
Mhm.
lead to this terrible, violent act against a woman. It feels like a real condemnation of society that has allowed a young man to plunge into the internet with no support system behind him. Um,
Yes.
until, of course, it turns out that we were
He's
wrong.
right. Well, sort of. So well, yeah, we were wrong.
Yeah,
I guess it's kind of it's like the midpoint between the conspiracy about the aliens being
yeah,
true, but there are the intentions of
yeah.
the aliens being different
Mm.
to what we thought. I feel like every character here is both a victim and a villain.
Hmm.
So I guess like sort of Teddy's origin story is that he's like a working class man who has sort of been failed by the system. He's a beekeeper, I think.
Yes. Yep.
Oh no, he works in a
He
factory.
works in a
He's a beekeeper
factory,
and
and he's
works
a
in a
beekeeper
factory.
is his hobby, and he works in he's packaging things, I think, isn't he?
Yeah, he packages things. And his mother is in a coma, due to the failure of some experimental treatment that she underwent, some medical trial that she underwent at the hands of Emma Stone's company. Um,
We get the impression, I
uh,
think, that this company is obviously it's sort of, it's a significant company, but it's also a major local employer. So I think that they're the overhead company for the packaging firm. The packaging work that he does
mhm,
is packaging their products, and they're sort of, a big presence in the local economy. So it's almost inescapable, I guess, the impact that they have had,
yes.
as well as obviously this impact on his mother, who I think she is a sort of double victim insofar as she had had an opioid addiction, which we know is obviously common in America, brought about,
Part of the big pharma.
yeah, brought about
Yeah,
often
brought about.
by prescription medication that then becomes addictive, to which essentially they
Mhm.
layered on another problem, which was by allowing her into the test group for clearly a drug that was not sufficiently well developed, because
Safe.
she then suffered again at the hands of the pharmaceutical industry. So
Yeah. And it's sort of Emma Stone's character, like, is part of this big cover up and like almost trying to silence the victims of this injustice.
we get that flashback speech, don't we? When, I mean, it's difficult in a way because all of the scenes of the mother are surreal in the way in which they're presented. But
Mm.
I think, where is it? This is why I'm meeting all of the families this week to let them know we are going to do better. And look, maybe we don't even try to market a product like this anymore. Maybe we call it a sunk cost and move on. Or maybe we use this experience to grow and to get this formula right. Because I do think if done correctly and safely, a product like this could help people like your mum.
Yeah, I certainly, it's again the labeling it up as a product rather than something that's a medicine or a treatment. It's
Yeah.
something called, it's like such an American like mindset of selling
Yeah.
something. Um, yeah,
And
it's
that
just
this
so,
is all about the
so
company's experience and not about the experience of the victim. And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
we clearly gather that although his mother is being paid for in a hospital, because of course, American system, otherwise goodness knows what would happen, but there's no um there's not been any kind of recompense paid to the family.
Or any support
Mm,
extended beyond
precisely.
just covering the
Yeah.
medical bills. Yeah. I guess that sort of is what fuels Teddy's fear and delusion, and his sort of like conspiratorial ideas is like a distrust of the institution, the system,
Mhm.
and obviously Big Pharma,
Yeah.
and drives him to kidnap Michelle.
Yeah. Which you
Um,
could say is sort of, without the alien bit, as it were, this is the sort of narrative that you can imagine. Somebody who has been so let down by this corporation that's had so much influence in his life, and has nowhere else to turn. One of the sort of minor kind of sub back plots is the one about the police officer, who had been his
yes,
babysitter,
Sheriff Casey.
yeah, and had
Yeah.
sexually abused him as a child, and is now a police officer. So he has no
Oh my
recourse to
God. And
the,
that's actually like, it's like putting these people in power as like,
yeah,
the
yeah,
person who's meant to be like the protective
yeah,
agent is in fact,
yeah.
yeah,
So you can sort of see why he might be driven to kind of, I guess, recognize the CEO of this company as kind of the manifestation of all of these people in authority and power, who have failed him. But he's gone one step further and said that, this is part of a wider conspiracy by aliens to destroy the
yeah,
Earth,
yes,
which, as you say, is not in fact the truth about what
the
supposedly the
alien
aliens.
intentions are,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Um,
yeah. I just wanted to go back for a second to the like sheriff,
mm,
what's his name? Casey. Yeah. Casey Boyd. So this that sort of whole part of the story of Teddy's sexual abuse comes from Casey almost trying to not atone, but like almost torment Teddy in order to like subdue his own guilt
Yes,
from what had
yeah.
happened in the past. Yeah, and it's interesting how like, for example, comparing Casey Boyd trying to atone for his well, atone in
Mm.
quotation marks for his mistakes versus Michelle, and how that affects the victims. Like almost like Boyd's very selfish, thoughtless
Mm.
kind of attempt to make amends, again in quotation marks, is actually
Yeah.
like part of just fueling Teddy's like mental state and alienation from the people around him.
So there's also a good parallel with the idea that in the same way that Michelle Fuller makes it all about like the company, so about like herself, about the company. So the sheriff makes it all about
All about
himself
himself.
and
Yeah, yeah,
justifying
yeah.
that, he never did this to anybody else. It was a
Oh,
power
so
thing. I was
gross.
young, and
Oh, so gross.
basically saying, it's the same kind of thing. Like I've learned from this. It's about me and assuaging my guilt and justifying my actions,
Yeah,
rather than acknowledging what the victim actually needs.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, well, poor Tezzy.
mm,
I mean, he's also like the other kind of big twist is Teddy like murdered loads of people,
yeah,
or
yeah.
Jonathan. So
This is one of our problems, isn't it? We have this
yeah.
like poor Teddy thing because we can empathize with his situation, but we're increasingly reminded that it doesn't justify his actions. Interestingly, I suspect that if Emma Stone were not a beautiful white woman, perhaps, but instead, the alien was very alien looking, monstrous. It's looked like some sort of praying mantis or something. Then we'd be fine with the action taken. But of course, we're encouraged to empathize. Even
Yeah, it's
though her
like a
character, yeah,
humanized.
even though her
Yeah,
character isn't attractive, we still recoil at the things that they do.
yeah. But yeah, I guess ultimately it's like we was sort of saying that Teddy's ideologies kind of stem from him trying to
Mm,
rationalize all the abuse that he
mm,
suffered at the hands of the
mm,
system, and also of other people like Sheriff Boyd.
yeah.
Um,
I also wonder whether there's
yeah.
something, I mean, we're sort of led to believe that as well as his mother's physical health, her mental health seems to have been very bad. Again, because this is portrayed in these kind of metaphorical visuals of um, giant needles and strings and floating and things like that. We can't pin down exactly what it is, but she too almost inadvertently, perhaps, or perhaps maliciously, I don't know, kind of puts onto him this idea that she's going to, because she's so, I guess, keen to recover from her addiction, she's going to go through all these terrible tests and trials and things that are clearly making her very
Mm.
ill, because she'll do it for him. And so he's left with this feeling that, somehow she did it for him and therefore he is
It's my
responsible.
fault,
Exactly.
yeah. His fault,
Um,
yeah. And also like abandoning him in some senses
yeah,
as
exactly. That
well.
sense of abandonment, I think, is a part of it. He's also been abandoned by his father. We're told, that his father walked out at some point.
Mm,
And he perhaps, I don't know, there's some transference of this feeling onto a kind of not only an authority but an authority power that's a woman, which I think is quite interesting, almost like as a sort of surrogate for his feelings about his mother. um
well, and I was trying to sort of like almost create parallels to like stuff that's happening in the real world. Is like I feel this could be a bit of a like a good metaphor for like the manosphere. If
mm.
anyone's seen the new Larue documentary, did you watch it, Claire? I
I
don't know.
haven't. I've read a lot about it. The reason I haven't, well, partly because stress levels and so on. It's
Yeah,
interesting. I
fair
think that in
enough.
some ways it might be quite suited to a viewer like me or you because we have a good working knowledge of the kind of critiques to be posed against the harmful views that are stated by people on it. A lot of the reviewers, however, I guess, have said that it's just platforming the these views and giving them an opportunity to be heard because Louis Theroux
Mm,
tends not to he tends to ask the questions that I guess the audience
it's quite a
yeah,
neutral, yeah.
leaving the audience, and things that are clearly kind of horrible and preposterous and unfounded to the viewer who I guess knows the context, they can analyze that,
Mm.
but to the viewer who doesn't, it's potentially perpetuating harm. As I said, that's not the reason I haven't watched it particularly, but it was just something that I was aware about. Um,
Yes.
but also, it's triggering quite a lot of this stuff, and I just feel like,
Oh yeah, yeah, for
it's
sure. I at the same time, it's like you saying that it's made for people like us. I think there's also the argument that it is. We derailed a
yeah,
little bit
that's all
so
right.
on the manosphere talking about. But anyways, I think it's also more for people who are like probably like my parents' age who actually don't aren't on the same like corners of the
Mhm.
internet.
Yeah,
Who actually don't know what is being peddled by
yeah,
these people, like by
yeah.
these platforms and stuff, and by these people and their platforms. Because it's stuff that you kind of already know what they're
Mm.
saying. I think it's more just jarring to hear it come out of someone's
Yeah.
mouth so directly because it's not something that the type of content that I'd be consuming day to day. So I see.
I think that that's
I
a very
completely
good point.
agree.
A
Yeah.
lot of people had this big wake up call when they watched Adolescence. Um,
Mm.
and I guess so having worked in so it's now 6 years since I left full-time teaching, but uh the boys' school in which I worked, I still think about so much the fact that we had all these seeds of what some, not all, I'm sure, but some of these boys were consuming and trying to talk about with me largely to get a rise because, they didn't have many women teachers and certainly probably not many that they would have these kind of conversations with, but basically sort of saying, Andrew Tate says this or whatever. And it was in the background of my awareness, that all of this stuff was being consumed by them and almost certainly by some of the teachers as well. And then it took another 5 years for something like Adolescence to come out, and then, 6 for the manosphere stuff. But I was reading about this stuff. There was a book, which might be because I never put anything away in front of me. Yes, it is. It's called Not All Dead White Men. And it is by Donna Zuckerberg. And it was interesting to me as a classicist because it basically is a deep dive into the red pill community and the way in which they kind of use ideas around the ancient world and ancient Rome, particularly as part of kind of the pickup artist world and the outright and things like that. And that came out, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I'm not sure. So I guess I was aware of all this stuff, but you're absolutely right that I wasn't talking about these things in the mainstream, and they weren't even being like acknowledged in the educational system just 6 years ago, or at least not in the educational system in
Yeah.
which I was working and in which it was very harmful. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think we are more
Um.
aware. I would say the other
Yeah.
thing that makes me think of a thing that people should read when they're thinking about, I guess, a character like Teddy is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, which is a sort of reworking of David Copperfield, but it's set in essentially kind of like poor white America. And it deals particularly with opioid addiction and the way in which that manifests and is like a complete, plague among certain white communities. And it made me think of that. And it reminds us that when we're thinking about kind of like, I guess, the trap between kind of white privilege and the fact that there was a group of men, particularly poor men, who are at risk of manipulation and
Yeah. Yeah.
being vulnerable. And Teddy, clearly, his mental health is not
Exactly.
good.
Yeah. No.
But our
Well,
prejudices
yeah,
against him are also not
yeah.
good. So, you know.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's exactly that is it was interesting to like, and kind of going off how we were saying with Teddy trying to rationalize what happened to him in his
Mm,
life, and the hand that he got dealt with, by sort of pinning all of his suffering onto this like one reason of the
mm,
Dromedans, and sort of by extension like
mm,
Michelle, this like sort of female CEO, like again also kind of like a like woman in power, and it's like quite similar, within this Louis Theroux documentary was quite, as we kind of, as he's quite famous for in his documentaries, kind of takes a bit of a neutral tone and also likes to delve into a bit of like the background of the
mm,
people that he's spending time with. And it was like interesting to me to see that a lot of these men, who were kind of spewing all of this horrible nonsense basically, um a lot of them actually had like working class backgrounds and suffered a lot of abuse at home, and had a lot of absent fathers in fact, and yeah, and it kind of seems like the whole kind of scapegoat for
mm.
them, instead of actually like reflecting on how the system treated them and how they suffered at the hands of others, mostly men in fact,
Yeah.
is then redirected onto how they treat
Women.
women.
Yeah.
um yeah, I don't know, I guess I kind of just see a little bit of a parallel there, that's sort of, and kind of feeds back into conspiracy versus like
Mm,
ideology, like
yeah.
um
It also,
I don't know.
you
Yeah.
mentioned something about kind of like, education, and obviously there's this very strong correlation between, um, I guess, extremist right-wing views and low education. And one of the things that we're sort of, I suppose, encouraged to think is that, this is a poorly educated young man who thinks that he is well educated because he's done all this stuff on the internet and reads a lot and watches lots of YouTube and things like that.
Mm, mm,
And I felt particularly myself that I had to remember to challenge, as it went on, I had to challenge my own kind of I guess views about the academy and things like that, that traditional education is not accessible to many people, and that actually, although we start off thinking that this is insane rabbit hole stuff that he's got into, and when he's talking about he's built on the studies of some YouTuber or whatever, I think, it's not studies, this is not research, and yet he's basically proved right. And so again, recognizing that poor education is a problem, but also recognizing that our prejudices about the educational system, and saying, that the only way to, he should be going to university and getting his PhD before he starts thinking that he's come up with unique research that nobody else could
mm.
possibly have done. And actually, no, he really has, and the fact that he built his model of the spaceship on like the most crap software you've ever seen, he still made an accurate representation of this spaceship, and made these calculations, and taught himself
Yeah, it's absurd.
taught himself an
But also,
anatomy,
yeah.
and rigged up an electric chair and things like that,
Mm,
all of which they're both horrific, and they tell us of the dangers of like unstructured education and studies without ethics committees, peer review. These
yes,
things are good.
yes.
But also the fact that gatekeeping education and assuming that somebody, we need to be providing better access to somebody who's clearly capable of educating himself, so that they don't go down into the I can justify dissecting people because they might be Andromedans road. Um, yeah. So, what about Don and the relationship there? What did you think about the way that was depicted?
Yeah. I guess it's almost kind of, it feels like a bit of a, I don't know, like a, if we're talking about power dynamics within the film and between characters, it's kind of like, Teddy's in the middle, and then we
Mm,
got CEO
Mm.
Michelle and the sheriff, and then that kind of all comes down onto, I think, Don. Um, but Don feels like the ultimate victim in all of this. I don't think there's a bad bone in Don's body, to be honest. He's this like neurodivergent man who seems to be dragged into this quite convoluted plot
Mm.
by Teddy. And like some of the horrible, it's like, Teddy tells Don that in order to not distract himself from their goal, he's forced to sterilize himself,
I
which
think,
was just, I
strictly
don't know.
speaking, it would be reversible chemical castration, but I don't think he tells.
Oh,
Well, I looked it up.
oh,
He
really?
said that it was progestin alternative, and that's used for temporary chemical castration insofar as if you stop the treatment, then eventually
Oh,
you
really?
will, yeah.
Okay,
It's
that's good.
yeah, exactly, but that's not really the implication that he gives in the film. But I was
No, no.
interested to know that. But yeah,
To
because Dawn is
do
obviously
a bit of
sort of
research, yeah.
yeah, yeah, there goes my
But it
browsing
feels a
history
little bit like
again.
it feels a little bit like Teddy almost grooms
Mm,
Don
yeah.
into this
Mm,
into the plot. And like I think it kind of comes to a climax where Don is then sort of being in turn manipulated by Michelle
mm,
when she gets the chance to sort of escape. And it's like very like high tension couple of scenes where like the sheriff's over um and they've just had this dinner and she's being held in the basement and she tries to convince Don to let her go, and you can tell that Don has this kind of like sort of almost two eight like angel
mm,
and devil on his shoulder, and like he ultimately is paralyzed by sort of the fear and guilt from his actions, um versus his loyalty to
mm,
Teddy. And at first he asks to be taken away from Earth, almost to like not face the
yeah.
consequences. And then instead shoots himself in the head, which was, I don't know, what did you think of that whole sort of sequence?
It was very shocking, and it
Mm.
leads to that kind of like everybody running around with blood all over them, sort of
Yeah.
almost kind of dark comedy kind of element of the sort of final stages of the film. But yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you say about Don. Interestingly, I think we see in him almost a glimpse of the idea that the alien influence might not be malign. So he repeatedly proposes, to Teddy that, oh, we're going to live in space, that this will be a good thing. We'll go to the Andromedans, and we won't be on Earth anymore. Um, Almost like he can see the idea that some sort of higher intelligent being could be better than humanity, which is something that,
And almost like merciful
yeah,
in a sense, I think,
exactly.
as well.
And that's something that
Um,
Teddy can't get his head around because he assumes that they must be a malign force. Now, admittedly, it's not looking so good when you look at Michelle as the paradigm of the alien race, because she
yeah.
claims herself to have been sort of like made worse and worse as the longer she held a position of power in among humanity.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, Don, as it were, can see a kind of like a better way, and he's also, of course, seen the person who cares for him, because ultimately, Teddy is in position as a carer, both for his mother, although she's obviously in a coma, and for Don. He's clearly not equipped to do this, and they don't have the support around them. But yeah, as you were saying about the hierarchy, there's something about the way in which um, Michelle uses, I mean, she uses a lot of different kind of types of ways to sort of manipulate her way out of the situation, which, you can sympathize with. But one of them is to kind of use her intellectual superiority and her rhetorical superiority. She uses long words and very eloquent kind of set out arguments in a way that Teddy can't. But it's the same sort of thing that Teddy tries to do to Don. So, he will be trying to explain the arguments for the disappearance of the bees and CCD, or he's talking about, Fermi's paradox, and saying, how he sort of worked around that in understanding why you might have the Andromedans on Earth. And Don doesn't grasp any of this in the same way that, Michelle is saying, what's it? He says Shibboleth instead of Shibboleth, and she sort of picks him up on this. And it's that kind of, I'm going to control you by showing you that I am kind of superior to you. Even though I'm not sure that Teddy's malicious towards Don. I think he just doesn't have anybody else, and he's so low down in his view, kind of like within the power structure, that he tries to maintain one final kind of element of control over Don, and perhaps even thinks it's for Don's own good, up until the point in which Don kills himself in a particularly head blowing up manner.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
poor Don.
poor Don, indeed.
Don's the only person I feel really sorry for in this film.
Yeah.
Should we talk a bit about Michelle as a character as well?
Yeah.
So she's a bit of a sort of a tyrannical boss, all overseeing alien. Yeah, I don't know. She seems in her, I guess, in the state of being kidnapped, and being held hostage. She never really acts very fearful. She's always quite calm and quite confident, and almost a bit I don't know, like a bit full of herself in some ways. I don't know. Do you think this is a, if ultimately we find out the Andromedans are a sort of force of good, like, and is this kind of, is her character just the product of sort of, I don't know, is her character the product of like osmosis of the human condition or something, or what do you think is sort of trying to be said there?
Well, one of the things that struck me was that although we're sort of making this point that, the Andromedans say that they're a benevolent force trying to save humanity, well, we're taking them at their word on that. I think that the British said that about their colonies as well. Some of them still do, that it was okay for us to go in and do these things because ultimately, we subdued the people and we took all of their natural resources, but we gave them a railway that they had to build themselves. It's this kind of, I guess it's a paternalism, a sort of savior complex that comes across. And yes, on the one hand, she sort of justifies it by saying that she's, as you say, sort of been, I guess, corrupted by the involvement she's had in the human system. But she presents, partly, of course, because we don't believe that she's an Andromedan for such a long time, but she presents as kind of the worst type of, I guess, corporate leader, insofar as what is it? Things like, apart from the stuff we've already talked about with regard to the victim of the pharmaceutical testing, there's the working day thing. Her speech to her assistant about emailing everybody about how they can go home at 5:30, except yes, of course, feel free to go home at 5:30 and be with their families. No one's going to be overworked like in the past. No more unpleasant incidents. But of course, it's not compulsory. And obviously, if people still have work to do, they should absolutely stay and continue to work. It's not strictly enforced, although we do still want to meet quotas. No pressure, but we are running a business here. It's all of that sort of, well-being. As a we care about your well-being, but we don't actually want to give you better working conditions.
We're like a family here, but it's a very fast-paced environment.
So... Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So she really embodies a lot of the kind of worst things about capitalist kind of corporate leadership, but she then uses that kind of corporate confidence that she has. It's the same way that she gives her little speech about diversity for the video, when she clearly is just saying it because,
Yeah,
but
could
yeah,
give less of a
exactly.
fuck. Yeah.
And then she uses the same kind of way of speaking when she's talking to Teddy, basically to say, I'm sufficiently
Quite
important
diplomatic, I think. Yeah.
that this is not going to work out well for you. This is why, and so on. Although arguably she's let down by the system as well, because the only person who comes to check up on Teddy and Don is the sheriff of uselessness and general corruption, who sees, like evidence of somebody having been like held down with shackles and yet just eats his cake and goes on his way until, of course, he is killed by Teddy. But I
Yeah.
almost forgot that he'd been killed.
Yeah.
That was how much I didn't really care.
Yes, yeah. I think this also, I guess, kind of almost again, challenging your perception of like, maybe in the eyes of the system, someone like Teddy and Don would never be able to execute a plot such as the one that they did to kidnap this very like high profile CEO. But I'm also really interested in like how I guess Michelle's sort of very self-confidence and business sort of CEO, I know cutthroatness is like how that perception of her would be like changed if she was a man.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know, I enjoyed I had a conversation with a friend recently about the term bossy and how a man never gets called bossy, he only ever gets called assertive and leadership
Yeah.
like, but that term is very exclusively used against women who
Yeah.
are like, I don't know, yeah.
I think that you are exactly right that there should be something, however kind of unpleasant and manifestation of so many bad things in the business world, but she's still seeing a woman as a CEO should be something that we see as positive. And as you say, we need to consider our language because of the way in which when we see these behaviors manifested by a woman, they feel more negative than if they were manifested by a man. I guess that the
Yeah,
flip
exactly.
side to that, I would say, that is this idea that there is kind of one way to operate in corporate leadership, and
Mm,
it's traditionally, I guess, been considered masculine, um,
mm,
which has for some people positive connotations, but also embodies the idea, I guess, of a certain kind of aggressiveness, avoids a culture where people thrive potentially, certain things. And of course, it leads to all of the stuff associated with kind of like bias against women in the workplace, potentially leads into ideas around racism and also, Me Too movement and
mm,
all of this sort of stuff, all of that.
mm.
But
At
what
least we know, well, actually, we can't say that for sure, but I was going to be like, what's the likelihood Michelle's abused her power to sexually assault someone in the
well,
workplace?
that's a very good point.
Well, I don't know. We can't say that for sure,
Yeah.
to be fair.
I suppose
We
what I'm
can't say
trying to
that for
say
sure.
is that we expect women to become that
Mm,
kind of figure. It's why all of the arguments around kind of Margaret Thatcher as a revolutionary kind of feminist figure for being the first woman prime minister, but in every way she was essentially a woman taking on the role of a man. It wasn't, she didn't promote women. She didn't argue that there
she's
are
called like
different
the
ways of doing.
Iron
Iron
Lady or
Lady,
something.
indeed, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
just
some
being, I
sort of
suppose, just being a woman
striker.
in power is not necessarily in and of
Mm,
itself striking a blow, against the patriarchy. If all you're doing is basically saying, I can be a patriarch, I just happened to have, ovaries or whatever your turf definition of women is. But
mm,
I guess, yeah. So there's something depressing, I suppose, which we're seeing a bit less of now. We have seen people like, Jacinda Ardern and people like that who
mm.
properly saying women can do power differently. But yeah, that might be going backwards, I suspect, at the moment. But I guess it does mean that there's something. I don't know how you felt, but although I was horrified at the sort of scene of her abduction and the squalid conditions in which she is held, and the fact that she is, although she's not sexually assaulted, she's physically assaulted. She has medical testing performed on her. It's awful.
Oh, and also the change in her treatment based off the fact that she's considered a like empress or suddenly of a higher
Yeah, but
stand.
interestingly, not an
Um,
empress, because I thought this was interesting. In their patriarchal wisdom, they assumed that the emperor, as a masculine term, will use he, him pronouns, and therefore it couldn't possibly be her as the emperor.
mm,
Um, Somebody made the point that when you get up into the alien council or whatever, everybody there is either a woman or a person of color. I mean, in like a great blobby knitted alien outfit, but almost like it was trying to make a point about this idea about this, we can all be terribly, terribly woke and have this diverse council, but ultimately they still kill off humanity.
maybe again, nihilist take
Yeah,
maybe for the best.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's obviously one of the arguments, if you believe that they are truly
Yes.
benevolent. Although I guess we're told the sort of like their actions have all stemmed out of guilt because when they first came to Earth, managed to wipe out the dinosaurs with a virus. So all their actions subsequently have been about, trying to make amends for this terrible mistake they made, which again is a kind of, although we're not sort of told that they had colonizing intentions, it is obviously something that happens with, colonizing. You turn up with your unknown pathogens and you wipe out all the indigenous people.
Mess everything up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I suppose although I have some sympathy for killing off the human race at times, I don't think that we can take as read the idea that the Andromedans know better and have the right to say that this is the benevolent act on behalf of Earth. We have tried and failed, and therefore there's no other way. We must kill off the humans. Again, we're told, that they throw in a reference to Atlantis, which I thought was a classic conspiracy theorist kind of thing. Just like, oh yeah, Atlantis was real. Just get that into one in there.
I wish they added more like. Oh no, it wasn't the Earth flat. No, did they have that?
I can't remember whether they did,
didn't.
but it's that sort of thing that obviously.
No, it was. I'm pretty sure it was flat. No, I liked that. I wish they tried to like put in as many like little like silly internet conspiracy theory Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess that's did you look up I looked up what Bugonia actually means. I'm
Virgil's Georgics. Is that what you found? So Virgil's Georgics is why I know what Bugonia means, but I suspect that that's quite niche knowledge. Do tell people
I feel like
what Bugonia is.
Claire would know. Yeah, so it's a myth that refers to, and this comes in with the bees theme of the movie as well. So it means progeny from an ox, refers to a myth that bees could spontaneously generate from the carcass of an ox that was sacrificed without any blood being spilt. So the screenwriter kind of explains that the meaning is that there might be some opportunity for new life that could arise from the ashes of something that's quite corrupt. And I don't know, some of the reviews and things I read sort of said that's a metaphor for contemporary civilization, and maybe kind of reflects the hopelessness and powerlessness I think maybe like normal people feel at the moment, and trying to figure out the relationship between us as humanity to the planet and other animals and species and life, and maybe at the same time imagining what that could look like without us as a sort of player in that. But yeah, I again, very nihilistic tone, and I'm not sure it's something that I agree with, to say that the mass extinction of a species is the way to go, and
Yeah,
that
I suppose that there's always
I don't know.
there's something always interesting in a narrative where essentially we saw this with like three body problem, for example, the idea that there is a higher intelligence, more dominant species than humans, and they start to act towards humanity the way that humanity acts towards species that it considers beneath itself. So, when
Mm,
we are in the process of causing species extinctions or certainly speeding up species extinctions, if not directly causing irreparable damage to the planet through
mm.
our human influence on the climate, all of these things. Well, why shouldn't a higher intelligence come in and say, well, you are of less significance than what we think they should
Everything
happen? Yeah,
else,
exactly. So,
yeah, yeah,
you're
basically.
harmful, so we'll wipe you out in the same way that humanity would say,
Mm,
that's a harmful pest or whatever, and we will wipe it out.
mm,
The bee metaphor is worth, I think, a little bit of exploration because it functions in a way as an allegory throughout the film. It made me go back and look at the whole thing about CCD, and I was trying to catch up on whether what Teddy said about it was accurate to kind of current thinking. Because I remember when it first became a thing, I guess. So I think that CCD, where basically you get colony collapse without apparent cause, sudden empty hives out of the blue. It was first recognized as a phenomenon back in 2006. And then there seems to have been a second wave in starting in 2024. And you're looking at about maybe up to 50% of hives being wiped out. And there are all these questions about, well, what's causing it? Changing weather patterns owing to the climate crisis seems to be a fairly I was going to say a fairly uncontentious claim, but who knows these days with what the
what the
American
conspiracy
government
theorists
exactly
are
is saying.
saying, yeah. Yeah, never mind. Yeah, the American government actually.
Yeah, that's
Very
those
true.
two suddenly overlapping in a considerable fashion. But like so drought conditions, extreme weather phenomena, these things can all affect obviously all ecosystems, but bees specifically. But then there have been questions about, the role of pesticides in particular. So we know that there are certain pathogens and also particular other species like mites and things like that that are part of the bee ecosystem anyway. So parasites like the varroa mite gets talked about a lot. We know that these have to be managed for bees to thrive, but there seems to be, although the causal link is potentially uncertain, certain pesticides that also cause direct harm to the bees and therefore cause weaker colonies and therefore perhaps makes them more susceptible to those pathogens and parasites or to other phenomena that are causing these issues. And neonicotinoids was the big one. They got banned in the EU and in some other countries. And of course, at the time, 2006, that included the UK. Post Brexit, the Tories decided that they would allow emergency use of neonicotinoids. And I remember this as being quite a thing. And then we say that the Labour government is rubbish, but one of the things that they did, and actually quite a few good things that have come in April 2026, I will concede, but last year they overturned the use of neonicotinoids in the UK for any reason. So hurrah, big up the bees, fewer pesticides, plant your lavender and things like that. But obviously they're like they're a massive pollinator, so very significant. But that's my little bee speech. But of course it becomes like this.
So that was a beautiful speech.
Well, thank you.
I didn't say that. Be there we go. Okay, continue. Sorry.
Thank you. Pun very welcome. But yeah, then when Michelle is talking about it, she talks about bees, but she's obviously also talking about humans. And where's that? I put the quote here. I know you want there to be a master plan, Teddy. You want the bees to be dying so it can be my fault and you don't have to think about the real reasons why species die. Immunodeficiencies, changing habitats, genetic factors, or sometimes a species just winds down. Very ominous. But it reminded me about that kind of thing. There's a lot of gaslighting that she does. Like, she's like, bees are actually on the rise. They're coming back, rather than, as I said, we're into this second wave of CCD. So that doesn't seem to be true. And also a sort of like, if we say that this is about humanity, then she's kind of saying there is something fundamentally wrong with the species, that things, that it can't be saved. It's sort of its own like fault that it's dying out. But that as you say about like the little person trying to do something of significance to counteract the state of the world, it's simply not true to say that there aren't figures in power who, whether it's Taylor Swift in her private jet or whether it is Elon Musk just existing, these are figures who in their day-to-day normality make more of an impact on the planet than you or I will in a lifetime. So that's depressing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a nice place to leave that.
So, okay,
I mean,
go on.
No, you go. Sorry,
I was just going to say,
I was just almost trying to process all of that. That was a lot
I was just thinking, shall we go to the to what happens at the end then? Because we're down into the deeply depressing at this point, or maybe it's not. I don't know. So, what did you think about the ending after? So, Teddy has killed his mother after falling for a really, really awful trick with the antifreeze.
Yes, yeah.
Again, reducing our sympathy, I think, towards Michelle, because it's not Teddy who gets harmed by this directly, it's his mother who he kills.
Yeah.
Don has blown his head off. Teddy gets blown up by his own bomb vest.
Bomb, yeah. His homemade bomb.
Did she do that deliberately? Or was it just the combination of him trying to transport to Andromeda while wearing a bomb vest? I wasn't quite...
Yeah, it's completely unclear. I want to say it was accidental. I want to say it was accidental. I'm sure what would have triggered it. But yeah.
I mean, you would think that, a homemade bomb vest and a transporter probably, not compatible.
Doesn't go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Not a terrorist threat on the Andromedan ship. I feel like they'd like lightly try and avoid that, to be honest. Also, how does that even if he gets up there, like surely that atmosphere or interesting. Well, I guess he'd know, to be fair. He is the Andromedan expert.
Well, true. True. Yes.
Yeah. Well, at the reveal, when Teddy goes to put antifreeze in his mum's IV, there's that reveal that in fact a number of people have been victims of the hand of Teddy. How does that change your perception of him?
I think that one of the things, I mean, it's obviously it's horrific, and we're into the sort of the Scandi dark drama kind of world of suddenly revealed murderers and things like that. But I also think that we're asked to sort of draw a parallel between the fact that he has essentially undertaken human or Andromedan testing. His test for finding out whether somebody is an Andromedan is basically electrocute them, and if they don't die, then they're Andromedan. And then he's dissected them, whatever, finding these very minor identifying factors. But I do think that we're the sort of the balancing between his mother in a coma on the grounds that, she either because of the pharmaceutical testing or because the Andromedans are putting her through some sort of massive genetic change in another failed experiment. We're basically told, that doesn't work either. So I guess we're asked to say that it's okay to do this sort of thing if you are at the top of the food chain, you're very powerful, you're a corporation. Perhaps there's an argument about consent, although I think that that's questionable when a vulnerable person is initiated into a drugs trial, versus Teddy, who does it in his, basement. um, it's wrong, but why are we more horrified by Teddy and his body parts in jars than we are by the actions of the Andromedans / their pharmaceutical company?
Again, maybe it's also like visual perception, like I guess potentially the vision of seeing these sort of not flailing limbs, but sort of dismembered body parts in jars in a sort of homemade laboratory versus someone who's just in a coma in white sheets is like potentially contributes to that disparity. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess the consent thing is part of it as well. But as you said, Teddy's mother was someone who was also, not in a position to give informed consent.
And of course, in the States, people get paid to take part in medical trials as well. So there is a disproportionate sense that people who are...
Well, the people in the UK get paid to do them too. My friend's doing a typhoid trial for $4,500. You can sign up to do that, by the way. They're still recruiting.
I will pass on that. Thank you. I mean, I suppose it does make sense, but I guess what worries me is about the fact that, when people are essentially in need of money, then they're more likely to put themselves into a vulnerable position, aren't they? Yeah. But there you go. Contact Marsha for the details if you wish to possibly not get typhoid or whatever. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be all anti-pharmaceutical because obviously, I'm very keen for the whole pharmaceutical industry to invest in the development of a drug to treat or cure ME. Thank you very much. That would be lovely. Not trying to diss you on that front, but we also know the ethics of pharmaceutical for profit and the problems that that has entailed.
Yeah. It's a very complicated industry.
Yeah, I don't want to undermine your future job prospects either, Masha. Just if you decide to stay in that sort of field.
Yeah. It's like I don't even think people understand the like massive amount of money that get moved in that, and it is rubbish. Like a lot of the time, money will be pumped into drugs that already exist. To basically make them to develop a way to produce them as cheaply as possible, and again make extra financial gains on top of that, rather than reinvesting into new problems, new diseases that don't have treatments yet, stuff like that. But it's just it's a very... science is interesting, and science under capitalism is even more interesting. And
although this is not a reason to undertake it in your own basement with...
No, exactly, 100%.
with your jam jars and so on. So obviously, ultimately, it turns out that the shoe closet is in fact a transporter, much to all of our kind of like surprise and things like that. And in a sort of rebirth type, coming out of the Matrix sort of moment, she comes up through the space pond and is reunited with her council or whoever they are on the ship that looks exactly like the ship that Teddy had predicted, and then essentially concedes that humanity is essentially kind of both I guess a contagion, because she says that she was influenced by it, is irredeemable, that certainly by their standards of the Andromedans, that their genetic endeavors have failed, their social endeavors have failed, although we don't really learn what those are. What were the Andromedans trying to do, really? Isn't very clear, other than to counteract what they see as kind of the aggressive qualities that have been genetically built into humans in the distant past. And so essentially she decides that she's going to pop the dome on the flat
On the flat Earth.
and then we get this incredible like montage to the accompaniment of one of my favorite old, whatever it is, 60s protest songs, Where Have All the Flowers Gone, which it's very beautiful, but also just like overlaid with these images of just like dead people.
Yeah.
Peacefully, I have to say, down they all go and so on.
Seemed like a painless death
Yeah.
if you had to go one way or another.
Better than some of the other ways that we've discussed, certainly, in terms of,
Yeah,
nuclear
sure.
war or things like that. So, but I just feel that like there's a really high bar kind of set for humanity to meet, and I don't know. And of course, they're not given any opportunity, I guess, or we're not told they're given any opportunity to, like,
Well, yeah, it's just
change.
judging, like, yeah, it feels like judging the whole, species based on the actions of like two people, what Don and Teddy, like, was the final straw that was,
Even though, arguably, although they targeted the wrong person, as it were, we're not told that this is a world where we don't have human overlords, as it were, corporate leaders or whatever who are responsible for terrible things. But then I suppose you could say, well, humanity has loads of chances. We keep getting chances. We told, this is when we're going to have reached this tipping point or this tipping point, and we see them and we ignore them. So maybe we have had all the opportunities we should have. I mentioned that there's this great review that I'll put the link in the notes on Awards Daily called Bugonia is Pure Genius. It's a review, but it's also kind of a thematic discussion as well. And it makes the comment, the biggest irony of all is that when they get mad at the two men who fail because Emma Stone's standards are so impossibly high, it is decided that humanity should be wiped out. Then Lanthimos reveals a haunting tableau of humanity caught just before the oxygen ran out, in all of its splendour and misery. Our silly lives of having sex, lying on the beach, contrasted with extreme poverty, people digging through trash, the third world, working, playing, studying, eating, praying, all over the world, humanity's end. And so that just made me think a bit about what those sort of like the tableau showed, these sort of, I guess, all of our good and bad points and fundamentals of being human, and also what humans do to one another, and which ones are we being judged on, essentially. That was
so a very long silence. It's just it is. It's not a cheery subject to talk about. I fear.
We talk about the end of the world quite a bit, though, don't we? Really?
We do. But it's such a cutthroat, quite like cold. So it's like I don't know. It doesn't like leave room for, the ending of the film doesn't leave room for any kind of like, grey areas or whatever. It's just like,
Although I suppose that there is a distinction being drawn between the kind of idea that this is a sort of euthanasia, that this is, for the good of the planet to kill off humanity, versus the idea that it's a sort of massacre, that, nobody should have the right to kill off a species.
Well, I guess at the end of the film, there is sort of a depiction of the bees coming back. So I don't know, I guess I don't know. It's nihilistic, but at the same time there is kind of
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe there's like almost a little shed of positive light on top
Yeah.
of that, and there is that kind of whole like some new life can
Mm.
spring out of the ashes of something that I don't
Yeah.
know,
And I guess
it
that,
is corrupt as yeah.
yeah, so, and we're sort of saying that, that nihilism that we feel is entirely anthropocentric. And if we start looking at it as a sort of
Mm,
planetary whole, then this is a message of hope.
mm,
And I think that there's a sort of idea that, potentially the Andromedans are going to try again because, they wiped out the dinosaurs and then they tried to make humans in their own image and then they wiped out the humans and, you know, um, or maybe people should just stop trying to intervene and just
mm.
allow.
Let nature run its
Exactly.
course, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah.
So there you go. It's a much, I don't know, what did feel a bit traumatized at the end, but also just like,
You did
I
text me being like,
know.
I need some time. I need to sit
I
and
was,
think
I
about
was
this. And I was like,
like,
okay, Claire.
I was much more like, I found myself at the end in a very different place from like where I was at the beginning. Um, so yeah, but I really liked it. Did really like it. Mm,
Hmm,
yeah.
I'm glad.
Any other takeaway thoughts? I'm not sure that it's very easy to do on this.
I feel like we've said quite a fair bit, to be honest.
Mm,
Yeah, I guess in summary is just kind of like you know how people kind of fall into these like quite radical ideologies as a sort of haven or I don't know um from I guess their
mm,
traumas and the suffering that they've experienced and I guess on the like sort of bigger picture I don't know like what you know what right is there how can I don't know yeah I guess like a in terms of euthanasia and I guess saving the wider
mm,
planet at the expense of the human race is that
mm.
who has the right to decide that
Yeah,
and whether that's the correct decision I
yeah.
don't know I think is the kind of two key takeaways I feel
Mm.
from for me from Begonia.
Yeah, and I guess that ultimately there's something here about this idea that again we have this clearly, very troubled and murderous young man, Teddy,
Mm,
and he's killed these people and he's kidnapped Michelle and ultimately tries to kill her. And yet, is he the villain when you compare that with the annihilation of the entire human race?
mm.
Um, I guess what I'm saying is kind of like this is all about recognizing that it's we don't need
It's almost
conspiracy
a bit of a
theories to
utilitarian stance in some
maybe.
sense. But I mean, like,
Yeah.
well, actually, in
Yeah.
a very extreme,
Yeah.
extreme sense. But like decentering, like, you know, the anthropomorphic
Mm.
stance and actually being
Yeah.
like, okay, what about the other, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of
Mm.
species? I don't
Mm.
actually, is it millions of species? I don't know how many.
I guess probably
How many
must
different
be.
kinds of
Yeah,
species live
must
on
be
Earth?
millions, I'd have thought.
I feel like
Yeah.
that's, yeah, should surely millions. How
Um,
many species on Earth? Let's find out now. Um, oh, 8.7
there you
million
go. Yeah.
eukaryotic species on Earth. So that's not even everything. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So to eliminate one seems suddenly very insignificant, doesn't
exactly.
it?
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
no, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh well. You've been listening to Dystopian Fiction has been moved to current affairs, in which Marcia and Claire advocate the annihilation of the human race. Uh, oh, good.
Oh,
Oh,
ay, ay, ay.
well, okay. Let us know what you think, because clearly there's lots of thinking to be done
Yes,
here.
there is a lot of thinking. Yes,
And
I think we did a pretty good job.
I
I
think so.
fear.
There, I say so
That's quite
myself.
good.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's
yeah.
quite
Um,
concise and yeah.
Come back in some weeks' time for episode 45, where
Yes.
there will be more body parts in jars. We're going to be talking
Ooh.
about Frankenstein, not all Frankenstein adaptations of all time, but the Guillermo del Toro recent film, and also we will talk about the
Oscar
novel
winning.
and that sort of thing.
Yes.
In the meantime, something may appear on Substack. You never know. Summer's nearly here. I tend to, remember to do stuff a bit more. But certainly get in touch. Tell us what you'd like us to do. We've got a few more things lined up, but we would like to hear more. We will get back into slightly more regular scheduling now that Marsha's dissertation is in. Hurrah, everybody.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, you can follow us on Instagram, on Substack, on Blue Sky. You can go to our website, dystopian fiction has been moved to currentaffairs.com, and you can buy merch. You can write to us and ask us kindly not to end the world, and we will consider it based on the quality of your negotiations, obviously. Have I remembered everything?
I believe that is everything. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Marsha.
Thank you very much, Claire.
Thank you, lovely listeners, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.